your opinion, what are the key benefits of media training for government officials, and why is it important for them to be able to communicate effectively with the media and the public?
First, thank you. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers. So I think good communication between the government and the citizen help government to get more legitimate authority. Beyond that, you don't want the government to leave a lacuna where anyone can grab the microphone and then speak on behalf of the government, because the government is nowhere. I think we saw that during COVID, when people who were not experts, who were also not speaking for the government, dressed themselves as experts and analysts, right? And then they were spreading misinformation. So it's important for government to be good in communications so that they alleviate any miscommunication that can happen if they are not present. So I think the most critical thing to remember is that the government has to first give assurance, and because that assurance comes with public authority, which they wield. So that can help alleviate and stop spreading of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, especially if the government is dealing with a conflict or a pandemic like what we saw during COVID.
Well, it's not all government departments. Many a time our reporters are out in the field and there's been an accident or an incident, and they will approach a police officer and seek comment, and they are never able to get comment until the spokesperson of the police service actually arrives. So obviously, departments or government departments such as the SAPS seem to have got that correct.
Well, sure. I mean, it's hierarchy, right? Government operates through hierarchy. Number one, you might be authorized to speak on behalf of the state, either in form of police or military or whatsoever. So it's important to realize that someone who is not authorized cannot give an answer on behalf of the government. So that's why sometimes you see police will refuse to speak until a spokesperson, having been briefed, then gives a position. You also don't want to have a situation where people from the same department end up speaking from both sides of their mouth, right? They end up giving conflicting information. So that's why you have to respect hierarchy. And this is very common, especially in government, more than in private sector.
Well, let's talk about the specific skills and knowledge areas that should be covered during media training for government.
First thing, it's important for government officials to be trained to speak to the media, right? Because that's one of the key points where government interacts with the public. So I think media training is very crucial, that people are able to communicate in a very audible and confident way. You want to post your confidence when you speak to the public. And because you wield some authority, people have to believe you when you speak. So I think that is critical. But also I think it's important to have basic skills like, for example, if you are going to use English as a medium to speak in an accessible way. It doesn't make much sense to speak with grandiose terms or speak with high verbose when you know that people who should hear the message will access it in a very simple way. So I think in journalism we teach what we call the KISS concept: keep it short and simple. You want to pass the message in a very effective, straightforward way, so that people who hear the message do not struggle to hear what you want to communicate. We call that noise in communication science. You speak and someone fails to hear your message, in part because you use the language that is not accessible, or because maybe there are aspects that are hindering your communication. So there are a number of aspects that you probably would want to look at, the kind of communication that you use, the language that you use, and whether or not the person who is appointed to be a spokesperson of a government department or whatever within the bureaucracy of the state is someone who can communicate in an effective and fostering confidence, so that people who listen to that person take the message in a more believable way.
Dr. Truss, what role does transparency and honesty play in government communication? And before you respond, I'd like to take you back to the issue around the Phala Phala saga, and how many proponents came out and said the president should have taken us into his confidence. He should have taken the nation into his confidence. So looking at that as an illustration of the need for maybe transparency and openness, talk to us about its importance.
Well, what you are talking about is the normative, right? What we expect from the government, or rather what we expect from people who hold public spaces like the president or ministers, we expect them to be transparent and honest individuals. And you are actually bringing in a case that remains problematic, right? Because it hasn't been ventilated enough, and the president up to now has failed to bring the nation into his confidence. So I think at a normative level, we expect politicians to be honest and transparent, but we know that it doesn't happen, right? It's beyond South Africa. I think you just observed a week ago or just a few days ago when Donald Trump was arraigned and arrested in New York, in part because of falsifying his business documents, right? So it just tells you the problem that we have when you have office holders who fail to be accountable or transparent. And there's a reason why they fail to be accountable and transparent. It's because there's something to hide in most of the cases, right? Because if they would come out open and be transparent, they probably would lose their positions. So I think that's one of the reasons why someone would struggle to be transparent or honest, because sometimes being honest, it means the end of your term as a president. And very few people want to leave office of president unceremoniously like that. So that's why with this struggle of transparency and honesty, especially in political office holders.
Well, Dr. Truss, that immediately raises the issue of spin doctors. And we know how government departments or offices of various presidents or various government officials have a spokesperson that has a capacity to bend to the truth, if you will. Talk to us about what role spin doctors play.
Well, they do exactly what you just mentioned, right? It's bending the truth or not bending or avoiding talking about the case altogether. You ask, for example, about the scooters in Eastern Cape, and someone talks about something else, can introduce a different conversation altogether. So yes, that's what spin doctors do. Unfortunately, in a developmental state or in a democracy, you don't expect that, right? You expect leaders to be transparent, to be accountable, and to be honest. Unfortunately, it remains a normative idea. We struggle to find leaders in this day and age who just want to come out open and say the truth. I think you watched even the documentary that we saw that was done by Al Jazeera that covers a number of countries in Africa that are involved in gold smuggling. If you listen to a number of governments that are implicated, they've been trying to twist the facts, blame Al Jazeera for doing these investigations, and the whole idea is spinning, right? And along the way, they lose the confidence of citizenry, because citizenry on one hand are suffering because of corruption and incompetence, and on the other hand, the government is only interested in putting on a brave face and lying that all things are under control. So I think in a developmental and a democratic state, we need less of spin doctors. We need accountable leaders, we need transparent leaders, and we need honest leaders more than spin. If we are able to have transparent, honest leaders, we will need lesser of spin doctors.
Now, how can government officials be held accountable for their actions? Because we've given various scenarios where spin doctors or other officials have come out and said certain mistruths or hidden the truth, but there seems to be no accountability at all.
In part because the good thing about South Africa is that there's devolution of power, right? You also have these arms of the state that keep each other accountable. So if a government department lies or tells a mistruth, there's parliament where they can still be held accountable. So that's one way. But also, the citizens can write petitions and petition the removal of that public office holder. And I think the third and maybe most effective is the elections. Every 5 years, citizens go for polls, and they have an opportunity once in those 5 years to punish a politician who lies, a politician who is not honest, a politician who is not transparent. I think those are some of the three interventions that citizens have. I don't want to create an assumption that citizens don't have power. I think they have so much power. If they have the power to decide who end up at the buildings or Matlabandov, I think they have the power to correct a misnomer. If you elect a wrong person this year, in 5 years you have an opportunity to either remove that person, or you can petition the parliament, right, to remove that person.
Now, are there any challenges and barriers to implementing effective media communication for government officials? If so, what are they, and are there ways of overcoming them?
I think the problem around barriers of communication in government is really hierarchical. I mean, we spoke about this earlier, that you need to follow a particular protocol, the line of command to pass information. I think you just watched the issue of Thabo Bester and his partner who have just been arrested somewhere, right? So you wait, and the information certainly didn't get to the minister first. It would have gotten to someone else. And then no police officer who would have that information would go on the media and speak. You need to follow a chain of command, and you have to observe some protocol. So that's one of the troubling things about government. Communication in government is usually slow. It's slow because there's multiple consultation, and you have to follow the chain of command. I can't come to you and say, this is how we are going to overcome it. I think what we can expect is for the government to be more effective in their communication strategies, and also to always be honest and upfront with the citizens, so that they can retain this legitimate authority which they have, right, or which they are supposed to have. Because when you fail to communicate over time, that power is eroded, because citizens will start looking for other alternative ways of getting information other than the government.
Now let's talk about the media itself playing a role in supporting effective communication. What can the media do?
So the first, I think one of the things that the media should do, Hugo, is to help train politicians, right? I think beyond asking academics like myself to train politicians, I think media should actually lead the role in training politicians on how to deal with the media, because you are the ones who try from time and again to get information from political office holders, and sometimes you fail. So I think they should get media training from us and from yourselves. And also the media should create a rapport with political experts, with ministers, with spokesperson, so that a spokesperson doesn't easily withhold information from you if you want an answer. I think some spokespersons are comfortable with some journalists, so they actually play a bigger role in leaking that information. That's why sometimes you see a particular media house or a particular journalist break news ahead of you. Why? Because they've established rapport with these spokespersons or with a particular minister. I don't believe that, for example, Julius Malema would have power to just know what's happening with cabinet reshuffle and tell you ahead that so-and-so is going to be removed, so-and-so is going to be the next minister, right? Someone somewhere leaks the information. And the question is why, right? So it's because he would have established rapport with whoever has access to either the president or the secretary general of a particular party, etc., right? So that's exactly what you have to do, people in the media. Establish rapport with spokespersons, with secretary generals, or with any other person occupying some government office, like in the parliament, etc., right? Because that helps you to get information. Even where someone would want to withhold the information, if you have a rapport, it becomes extremely difficult. Or if it is difficult or are not allowed for a person to pass on the information, they'll end up leaking that information, and then you probably have an anonymous source telling you the information.
Dr. Trust, appreciate your time this afternoon. Dr. Trust Matsilela, political analyst and lecturer in the journalism department of the Cape Peninsula University of Technology.